Mafia 3 is probably the most controversial game in the entire Mafia series. Some people love the setting and the story, but maybe the repetitive open world gameplay is what turns some people away. And when I first played it a couple years ago and did a video on it, I knew it wasn't going to hold up to the first two, but it was definitely not bad at all. And I still stand by that, but let's get more into that. So just like in 2, the definitive edition of this one isn't actually a remake. Mafia Definitive Edition was completely remade from the ground up, whereas 3 came out in 2016. So this version is more of a remaster with better visuals and performance. And honestly, I can understand why. I don't think a 2016 game needs a full remake. I mean, maybe now, but not back in 2020. Mafia 2, however, came out in 2010, so I think that one is a bit more due for a proper remake now, who knows. So in terms of the narrative, we follow the new protagonist, Lincoln Clay, who's a Vietnam War veteran who's just returned home. The whole idea is him going on a revenge path against the Italian Mafia, who then kills his adopted family, more specifically the Black Mob, and that's the main plot and what makes the story. But with the setting of the late 60s, the story does address many of the issues of racial equality in this time, which had a big impact on what life was like, of course, and the government. And I think that's one of the more interesting things about the game. It's not just about using the 60s because it looks so cool. The time period actually does play quite a big part in the story and Lincoln's experiences throughout the game. And the story does involve many flashbacks and news segments with a lot of documentary style cutscenes, which was quite different, sort of with people talking to the camera and commentating on events. It is interesting and hasn't been done in the franchise before, or definitely not as prominent. Some might like it, others not so much. As I mentioned, the style of the game takes away from the true Mafia feeling that we got, but then again, not only is it later on, so it's not going to feel the exact same, but it's also clear that they wanted to do something a bit different this time and not just have the same story of someone starting from nowhere and then becoming a Mafia boss, just with a different character. We have seen that all before. So overall, I still enjoyed the game and the story, and the writing isn't bad at all. Just don't expect a similar narrative to the other games. I want to state the voice acting as well in the main characters, not just Lincoln. I believe they did a great job, and it did surprise me. I wasn't kind of expecting it from this game, so that's definitely a bonus. It seems quite realistic as well, and it's more immersive. The mouth movement and the animations, they're quite good, but I'll talk more about the visuals of the game later. And actually, one of the biggest reasons I was interested in this game in the first place was the setting. I love the idea of the 60s America setting. There's not a ton of games that do it and have it set in this era, and Mafia 3 just kills this representation of it. New Bordeaux has a really good atmosphere, and there's just something about driving around the city that I really enjoyed. And of course, a huge part of it is the cars as well. There's so many lowriders and, you know, Mustangs, Thunderbirds, Cadillacs, etc., all with such a clean design to them. And I think the game does quite a good job at making the cars feel like they're actually from that period. And as I said in the other games, I love the driving mechanics and the vehicles. They all feel quite natural in all their games, rather than them having no weight to them at all and no leeway when turning. The different models do vary quite a bit on how they feel to drive, and of course they look great. It's one of those things where even if I'm just travelling across the map to start another mission, I don't really mind it because the driving itself is enjoyable. And I think that's important because you're going to be doing it quite a bit. And Mafia 3 is a way more open world game than the first two, and that's really where the biggest change did come in. But of course, Lincoln's main goal and drive is the revenge story and hunting down these people, which does mean the story missions themselves, they do involve you going after them and then being ordered to take down a target after being informed about some activity in a certain district from another character, which is then what sets up the mission. But the goal is to achieve a certain amount of damage most of the time to complete them, or like taking down a target after that. So it's not anything we haven't seen before is what I'm saying, and some games do it quite well because the freedom is in your hands and how you want to go about the mission. And you do have quite a bit of experimentation in how you want to go and take down this target. Mainly open worlds and tactical shooters, they do it the best, but with this game it's a bit more difficult because not only is it a smaller game and it's more action adventure style, but the fact it's almost every single mission and it all feels quite similar, just constantly repeating the same formula, it does become a bit repetitive, I can't lie. And this is probably the biggest issue with the game. It's not that the missions are necessarily bad, it's just after a while you know exactly what you're going to be doing. You'll go into a district, find out what is happening, cause some damage, and then take down a target and move on, and just do basically the same thing again. Compared to the other games, which I did really enjoy, the missions were so more exciting and involved, and this repetitive gameplay was quite a big complaint when it first came out. The gameplay itself and how it feels is of course going to be quite similar to the other entries, no massive change changes made, I do see a difference in animations and shooting mechanics. They are a bit more involved, I suppose, and realistic with it being a newer release. Also, a big aspect I noticed, and what ties in with the repetitive gameplay, is that the gameplay feels quite easy even on a high difficulty, whereas the tactical shooter games, for example, there's more to the gameplay and the enemies put up a bit more of a fight, and you can customize way more, and it just feels quite good for your playstyle, and that makes the repeated formula actually quite fun in the other games. This one, compared to the first game and the second, the missions were a lot more exciting and involved, but when it comes to the actual mechanics, I don't really have any major complaints. The melee takedowns and the stealth mechanics, they're quite good. It does include some brutal takedowns, which are very brutal and help to stun nearby enemies. There's great use of cover and implementing the environment. As I said, the animations are improved from what I remember. Then when you're in the middle of a fight, you can counter and perform various moves. Nothing major, but it seems they have focused on stealth as well. The stealth movement and the covering, it does feel quite fluid to like move to another point and switch cover. And then adding on to the gameplay, it does feel quite smooth in the gunplay and it's not so clunky. You have a big variety of weapons to test out, just like in 2. The same selection with what we're sort of used to with handguns, shotguns, etc. And of course the classic Tommy gun as well. There's also a few special weapons they've included, one being an RPG, plus some DLC guns. The equipment is near enough the same as well. You'll find the typical throwables with some more modern ones as well, because it's set later down the line. There's Molotovs, C4s, mines, throwing knives and stuff. So there's definitely enough to have some fun with it. It's just a shame that the game doesn't really push for those mechanics to be used as much as they could. And then we have the performance. Now you might remember the game had quite a rough launch when it first came out, and that was one of the biggest issues, with lots of bugs and FPS issues. Thankfully the performance has been quite improved since the launch in terms of glitches, that's for sure. It's not by no means perfect. I did experience some FPS drops and stuff, but I know for a lot of players they weren't getting near enough the same FPS beforehand. But it's still smooth and feels fine. Obviously if you're playing it today you're getting a much better experience than what people were getting back then, and visually I think it still holds up quite well. It's not a remake, as I said, but I don't think it needs to be. The character animations and their facial animations, they're quite good, and the world itself does a great job at selling that 1960s atmosphere. And I think that is where the biggest debate comes in. Does Mafia 3 actually feel like a Mafia game? Honestly, not so much, at least not in the same way. The first 2 games were way more focused on that theme and the story. You'd have these linear missions that constantly move the narrative, whereas 3 just puts a bit more focus on the open world gameplay, and I can understand why some people don't like that. It does feel like they took away the Mafia formula and put it into a much more traditional open world game, which I'm sure was quite popular at the time. Maybe that's why they did it, but at the same time I don't think that's a bad thing automatically. It's clear that they wanted to try something different. We've already had 2 games that follow a very similar structure, so I can appreciate that they wanted to give us something new. The problem is that the open world and that structure just doesn't always work together. There's a lot of potential here, it's just that you're constantly doing the same things, and eventually that takes away from the experience. So yeah, after playing it, I still would recommend it, although it has had its issues as I covered. I believe the other 2 games are better, but I would still recommend the game for now. For anyone who is considering it and likes the franchise, just don't expect a true Mafia game and what you're used to. And I knew it wouldn't be before that due to the later setting and the complaints I heard with the changes they made. But yeah, overall I didn't mind the game. I had a good time playing it back then and now. And that goes with the entire series. It's one of my favourites. The first game is my favourite because of the storytelling. 2 does have its own problems with the definitive version of the game, but I still did enjoy it. And 3 is definitely the weakest of the 3. But it doesn't mean it's a bad game at all. I think there's a lot to enjoy here. The setting is a huge standout. The cars are great as well. Driving is probably still one of my favourite parts. And Lincoln as a protagonist isn't bad at all. I did enjoy him. The biggest problem is just, like I said, the repetitive gameplay. If there was more variety in the missions, I genuinely think I'd have a much more higher opinion of the game. But if you're able to get past that, I think there is a good game here. And the main reason why I did this video was because of the new update they did for the first game, so that sort of brings in more people. It had a huge 60 FPS update for new gen consoles, and as well as the entire franchise went on sale because of it, so it's quite cheap to get the game game now, so who knows, maybe more people want to check it out. And that is where I end my video on Mafia 3 Definitive Edition in 2026. If you did enjoy, let me know by tapping that like button down below. And if you enjoy single player and multiplayer games as well, then that's what this channel does focus on. I have many playlists on a selection of games, so you can subscribe to the channel if you're new. And if you want to support me by becoming a member of the channel, you can by clicking the join button, starting at level 1 or 2 to gain access to various perks. And if anyone drinks G Fuel, you can use my code CALZY at checkout to get a discount on your order. And that was Mafia 3 Definitive Edition in 2026, and bye bye.